Hello, today is April 24th. This is the broader SIG cluster lifecycle meeting. And we don't really have a lot of agenda topics for today, but we'll feel free to freeform if you have things you want to discuss. I was going to give an overview of some of the, at least from the KubeADM perspective, some of the 1.11 updates of where we're at. I would also like to, is there anyone else from Cluster API here? I don't see other cluster API folks here. I'd like to get a TLDR from those folks too at some point in time to get a summary and synopsis of what's going on there. We do have a lot of broader sub-projects. I don't know if other folks wanted to give other updates for other sub-projects too as well. It might be more broadly useful. So my update for 1.11 is we're kind of burning down the backlog, discovering some things that were kind of unexpected items with configuration and unexpected items with upgrades, but I think we have a bearing on fixes for the upgrades to backport for 1.10. They should be coming soon. We already have some of it merged. The other ones, their PRs are up. We just need to go through and finish off the PRs to get them in the 1.10.2 release. Other than that, we've been burning down the backlog. We've been executing against it. There's still a bunch of things I need to triage for PRs that are currently in flight at the moment. To give a synopsis, we are like 23 or 24 out of like, I think 90 total issues for the 1.11 milestone. I don't think we're gonna get all of them in, but I do think we're gonna get a good chunk of them in. Definitely way more than half at this current clip. And I'm sure once folks are off of these super thorny issues and are executing on the primary ones, that will be even faster. And there's a bunch in the backlog that I need to finish reviews on. Did folks have any questions, comments, complaints, concerns about how to execute? I know I sent an email to the SIG about how I shuffle sorted the backlog, and I'm just wondering if anybody has any comments there. No comments? Everything's hunky-dory?
So, Tim, what would you say are like the biggest to-do items to get into 1.11 that nobody's working on right now? Do we have visibility into those?
We do. We need to write up caps for them. The biggest ones are, I will call them, I will dub them Grand Unified Config. And the second one I will dub as Sentinel for self-hosting. So I need to do the Sentinel for self-hosting one. And I know that Liz was working on the Grand Unified Config one, and we're going to talk about that probably tomorrow. The reason for Grand Unified Config is we don't really have it all documented. It's not been all pushed to beta. We should do this, and we should vet it, and we should make sure that we're addressing all of the concerns that can occur for configuration for all the multiple incantations that we can do for deployment. So my goal is to have the KEPs in place this release cycle, as well as all the people who are starting to burn into this area to understand the entire state space and how we want to refactor it going forwards. I know that Fabrizio is doing a lot of work on the master join stuff that was from last cycle into this cycle, but some of that Grand Unified Config will be affected by master join. They'll be linked. I know that Matt had a proposal there, but we need to suss out the configuration problems that are currently occurring, because they're not isolated to one space. They occur across the whole upgrade scenario, and they would affect HA master join scenarios, workflows. Other questions? If not, we can move on to the next agenda item. Also, again, if you have agenda items, we can.
When is code freeze for 1.11?
I have a doc. Hold on. Code freeze itself is. So it's the code slush period starts on May 28th and then through June 19th. So that's the date range that I have. So it's a really long slush phase. I know they did this last time too. So bug fixes only during that phase. I don't think we are, I purposely kind of avoided the whole feature process thing this release cycle because we have so many open feature issues that kind of all percolate to pieces that we've been working on for several releases that I'm just punting on the notion of creating new features in the features repo. And I'm going to focus instead on just writing proposals that are executable, tangible, and that people can understand.
Okay. I think I was out for all of 110. What is code slush new? What is that like? Sort of like a soft freeze or something like that, based on
That's
the
what
metaphor?
they've always called it, code slush, but it's basically only bug fixes are allowed during that period of time. So there are no net new features, no net new anything, just only triage and bug fix and test fixes.
Okay.
Isn't there some famous thing that the Eskimos have like 13 words for snow or ice? I wonder whether we will like come to rival that with our slush and freeze and future terms.
It's funny because it's true. I'm going to talk with the SIG release team to have some choice words about what it means to have a release, because we've been releasing a bunch of stuff that has never passed all the tests. And we always get into these weird scenarios where right now we've spent a lot of 110, the first weeks of 110, basically fixing bugs from the release that where users have come back and they've been like, these things are broken. And I want to prevent that from occurring again.
I guess one question there is like how many of those issues would have been caught if we had waited for all our tests to pass, right? Like how many of them are insufficient coverage versus just not waiting, right?
Well, the problem with the big upgrade ones, the ones that we dealt with this cycle, were a result of the upgrade test suite for kubeadm being totally busted. And it wasn't with kubeadm itself, it was the entire jiggery and no one owning it. And my goal this cycle is to basically have to fall on the sword and own it at least until we have a replacement. I don't particularly like what's there, and it's very difficult to debug, but it's what we have for the time being.
I agree. It certainly is complicated, and I think that they're making great progress in simplifying it. About that. But I'd obviously love for it to be completely simpler today.
Yeah, I'd like to have like two separate steps, like, that I could easily look at in the logs and be like, provisioning, tests. Just totally separate those two things.
I personally have found kube test itself to be fairly easy-ish to understand. It's the mechanics around kube test that I have found more complicated. Yeah. But I think that some of those mechanics around kube test are being simplified or rationalized. So if you want to run it on your own, yeah, I'm also trying to like get more testing in. Like I'd love a COPS rolling update test, and trying to figure out how to get that into the EDE infrastructure is indeed tricky.
Yeah, so I am going to, that is actually next on, besides going through the current list of PRs that I have to review, that is one of the higher priority items that I need to address. Are there any other questions, comments, complaints, concerns? Nope. The only other agenda item we had on the list here was, Chris, different doc, sorry. Was Jamie regarding KubeCon meetup?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be there next week. I was wondering if we're gonna have any kind of like formal SIG meeting or anything like that, or whether it's more informal. I think in Austin last year there was something, I think. So I was just wondering what the deal is there.
So we talked about it originally, but the only times we could actually get a separate meeting room was during the evening. And it was really difficult for us to kind of rationalize people wanting to come back. in the evening to want to do this. But what I was proposing too was to do an informal type of thing during if you're going to be there for the contributor meetings, to possibly just do a hallway talk, for whatever time period that we think is reasonable, and just find a separate room to discuss. That's probably the best time to suss it out, because a lot of times I won't say disparaging things in the public venue, but the contributor summit it's questionable content, and sometimes the hallway banter is of a higher value, I've found.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be able to find some kind of breakout space. For the contributor summit, is that the day before the main summit? Is on May the 2nd, or?
It is on Tuesday. That's all I know. I think that's May the 2nd. Hold on, I can take a look at my calendar.
That's May the 1st, I think.
May the 1st, yes.
I think I'm flying in that day. So is it like all day, or is it just the afternoon?
It is all day, I believe. There's a morning track and an afternoon track. So if we want to have a informal sort of SIG cluster lifecycle gathering in the afternoon time frame, I'd be happy to do that. I'm sure I'll probably prefer to talk about things that we can do at that point versus paint shades on the bike shed, on how we can make things more better in the community. So why don't we informally do that? Is there an easiest way should we use the mailing list or maybe the SIG cluster lifecycle Slack channel to informally discuss meetup options during that time? Just so folks are aware there's a rallying point. Does that seem reasonable?
Yep, sounds good to me. Maybe like a mailing list thread and then pin it on the Slack channel.
That seems reasonable. And also poke at channel here. In the afternoon, hey, we're going to informally meet. So if folks want to, that seems like an easy way to gather when we're all. Make sure you have Slack on your phone when you're traveling. I usually mute that sucker, but it's like a noise generator. Are there any other agenda topics?
Is Lucas still doing a bunch of school exams, or what's? I haven't seen him on Slack that much.
I think Lucas is doing his conscription duty at this point.
Oh wow! Oh yeah, Finland.
Yeah. So I think he's in that stage. So right now we're holding on the fort. The last release cycle, the fort almost fell apart, but then I think this cycle we're well on our way to revamping and putting up new roofing tiles, and the fort's got new walls, and everybody's looking at different ways to evaluate and change the fort. I know there's a lot of documents that are in flight and a lot of different PRs around modifying things like phases to deprecate the existing phases subcommand and to just go and kind of collapse pieces of it to have a DAG model. So that's a good one. Fabrizio has a doc on that.
I would say one thing I would love to discuss at KubeCon, but I mean in general, I think that there are other areas of SIG cluster lifecycle that I would love to talk about in the SIG cluster lifecycle space. We grapple with them in COPS, but they're not really COPS issues. Things like etcd management, add-ons management, all of those. So I think it's primarily on me to get it to a point where I can bring it to the SIG, but I would love to, or anyone else that obviously wants to, but I mean, I'm faulting myself rather than faulting the SIG, but I would love to have, the opportunity to discuss some of those items, I guess, at KubeCon and then going forwards.
Etcd management, absolutely. I think that is one of those things where it's an ongoing issue, right? And having a set of tools or well-defined playbooks or however we want to talk about it. Playbooks is an actual step-by-step process, not an actual Ansible playbook itself. So that way it's at least documented so folks can recreate it without whatever tooling they decide. Is a legit thing. I don't know if I know you were out for a while, Jamie, but basically the etcd operator is dead beef. So we are not going to.
That was my take on it a few months ago as well. It seems like things have come to a conclusion there. So yeah, c'est la vie.
Yep. But I think a lot of the configuration details will actually live on inside of the grand unified config and other places, right? So I think the idea of having, having the conversation about what it means to have the configuration for some of this stuff in a CRD or in some unified config map is a totally worthwhile effort, because that will live across deployments and have supportability for that stuff. So
does anybody have a link to that grand unified config thing? I've heard it a few times. I don't really know what it is.
That's because I've said it like 4 times now. But no, we are going to try and come up with a proposal, hopefully this cycle, for it. We basically what happened is we had a bunch of upgrade issues. The upgrade issues dealt with config, and then we were talking about what the master join scenario meant and what it meant for multiple SCD members to be supported and how do you do upgrades across that. And all of that boiled down to like our config structure is kind of a little broken. So we need to be able to support adaptation, modification, and have all the I's dotted and T's crossed for configuration that supports these different incantations of how we do deployments. Because right now it does not. With regards to self-hosting, I have a different proposal and idea there that I'll write up, hopefully on my flight to KubeCon. Nice like 10-hour jaunt so I can actually focus. I don't have any other group topics unless other folks do. Does anyone want to give a TLDR summary of Cluster API, where that's at? Craig, or I think Rodrigo just dropped.
So I missed the last SIG meeting for SIG Cluster Lifecycle. For Cluster API, or the working group meeting, I should say. Current status is that there's been a lot of work migrating the repo, and the repo migrated just last week. I think it was last week or the week before. So I think it's about getting the pull requests kind of lined up for the new repo and whatnot. But I don't know that there was any major changes to the API at this point.
Okay. All right, I'll ask one last time if there's any other group topics for folks to discuss. Otherwise, we can get a whole bunch of time back so we can execute on 111 agenda items. So on the backlog. Going once, twice, 3 times. All right, well, thanks everybody. And again, next meeting, feel free to percolate the backlog of things you want to discuss during the SIG meeting. And for folks who are traveling, safe travels, and we'll see you potentially at KubeCon.